Welcome, everybody, to another episode of PhinManiacs Live. I am your host, Louis Sung, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Chad Ronnebaum. And it's been a little bit earlier than. Oops, sorry. Here we go. We got an echo here. Okay, that should be better. Okay, so we've got some stuff to talk about, and luckily, it's not quite as late as the last time we did this. It only took a couple weeks for us to get back to this instead of 2-3 months. So I call that a win. So anyway, it's one day before Thanksgiving. How are you doing, Mr. Ronnebaum?
I'm doing good. Ready to eat some turkey, watch some football. So despite it being one of those very difficult injury-ridden seasons, still kicking.
Yep. So yeah, we're going to be talking about what the chances are of the Dolphins still making the playoffs. We obviously know that they're mathematically still in the race, so there's still hope in that regard. Whether you feel there's hope or not is another story, and that's what we're going to talk about. And whether or not Ryan Tannehill's presence is going to make that much of a difference. And if it doesn't, what is the best course of action for the team going forward? And actually, now that I think about it, we may add one more little topic, because I had somebody ask me the other day. It's one big long rant about Stephen Ross and whether or not he's the reason the Dolphins have been failing for the past 10 years or so. And I don't know. I guess this is that time of year when the Dolphins are struggling, or we can start saying that everybody has to go and everybody needs to leave and everybody's a problem and the whole team needs to be scrapped and rebuilt from scratch, like as far up as the freaking building they practice in. So we'll talk about all of that stuff right before Thanksgiving and we pass out from a carb coma. So let's just go ahead and get started. On Sunday, the Miami Dolphins will be facing off against the Indianapolis Colts, and Ryan Tannehill is confirmed to be starting on Sunday, meaning that he can come back and try to show whether or not he still has what it takes to be a decent starting quarterback. But so now here we have this issue here. Once again, we're discussing, is Ryan Tannehill the guy? Okay, pretty much no. We know that Ryan Tannehill is not the guy. He's not Patrick Mahomes level of good. He's not Drew Brees or Tom Brady or anything like that. He's not going to ever be the elite quarterback that Dolphins fans have been looking for ever since the retirement of Dan Marino. We know that. It's not going to happen. And I don't want to cast any aspersions or make it so that I curse the team even further. So I'm not going to say what's on my mind right now, but we'll just go ahead and talk about just this upcoming week and the next few weeks. What are the chances of the Dolphins making the playoffs going forward with Ryan Tannehill back at quarterback? Is there even the slightest bit of hope at this point, Chad?
Well, yeah, I think so, Louis. I think the chances of making the playoffs, simply because of our schedule. I mean, we've got 2 games against a Buffalo team that has plenty of its own problems. I would say we very well have the capability to beat Buffalo. Jacksonville's having plenty of their own issues, and the Colts, I don't think, are a significantly better team than the Dolphins. And so that's 4 games right there that are winnable for the team, and so if we win those games, you're at 9-7, and usually 9-7 has you somewhere in the playoff discussion. With that being said, I don't think we're a competitive team, Louis. I think it just happens to be one of those years where we got a very weak schedule, and that's allowing us to maybe seem like we're doing okay, but any really competitive team we've played for the most part has really just beat us pretty easily. I mean, Green Bay is not a really good football team right now. They're struggling, and they kind of had their way with us. I guess you could argue the opening game against the Titans, we had a lot more of our team not injured at that time when we beat them, but Houston, again, that's a team that's kind of a wild card fringe team to me. They're not a team that's going to go in and beat teams like the Chiefs right now, or probably the Patriots, but they had their way with us. So it's kind of a bittersweet. That's kind of been the season where I feel like here we are in the playoff discussion, and we absolutely should be because of the teams we play, but yet I think everybody kind of realizes if we did make the playoffs, we are not really even close to being competitive in the playoffs.
And that is where my problem lies, because obviously, see that, and now here's where the next question comes in. And honestly, I'm not even going to spend a whole lot of time just discussing exactly how we feel about whether the Dolphins will make the playoffs, because even if, like you just said, even if they do, it's not likely that they will be able to do much. So now I'm just going to go ahead and go into the next question, which leads into that. If they make the playoffs, but we know they're going to get whooped anyway, is that a successful season?
I guess it depends what people are looking for. I mean, anytime you make the playoffs in this league, I think it's pretty successful because you've got 32 teams and only 12 go. On a side note, and I'll leave it at that, I think the NFL needs to address that. I think anytime you have a league, your playoffs should be designed to get about half of the teams. The league's numbers should get about half the teams in the playoffs. So I think the NFL should expand the playoffs out to about 16 teams maybe, but that's a different discussion topic. So I think making the playoffs when only 12 out of 32 teams make it in a league that's very, very competitive. This isn't like college football with the Alabamas of the world that are significantly more talented. These teams are all real close. And so making that's an achievement. We've made the playoffs, once in the last 15 years or something, 2 times maybe. And so it's not an easy thing to do. So I don't want to take away from the team as a whole if they pull that off. But if that's what you like to have as a competitive team, if what you really want is to win the Super Bowl, I feel like our strategy right now is taking a step backwards, not forwards. I would, if we were trying to win a Super Bowl in the next 2 or 3 years, I would think things like trading Devontae Parker and things like that, so that we could try to build for the coming seasons. And some teams are doing that. Obviously, the Raiders are doing it. You saw the Detroit Lions, who were in the playoff picture when they traded Golden Tate. That's them kind of taking that approach, like, well, we're in the playoff race, but we aren't going to beat the Rams. We understand that, so we're going to try to get our team to be a Super Bowl competitive team, not a playoff competitive team. So I guess that depends on that outlooks. For me personally, my biggest problem right now is our offense. I understand Burke has his criticisms, and I'm sure some of that is justified and not. And I know we've had a lot of injuries, but I'm looking at, since Gase's arrival again, we have not had an offense that's even near average. It's always been a very, very poor offense. And so that, to me, is looking at this season, and whether you blame it on Ryan Tannehill's absence or injuries or whatever that is, we're now going through what looks like it's going to be 3 years of having one of the worst offenses in the league, with a coach that is supposed to be really good at coordinating offense and developing quarterbacks, and those things aren't happening. So I feel like it makes the season as a whole not very successful.
So basically you're saying that even if they make the playoffs, but since the offense has struggled so mightily and all that other stuff that you just mentioned, so even if they make the playoffs, no, not really. This was not a necessarily successful season.
Not for me. Not for me. I think that making the playoffs, so for a lot of people, that's difficult. And if you've been a fan of the team for a long while, that used to be expected when it was the Shula days. You always made the playoffs almost, and now it's you hope to make it once in 5 years right now. So making the playoffs, I don't want to understate that as not being significantly successful for the team, but I just feel like since Adam, really, before Adam Gase, any of the coaches, we have not had a competitive football team in a long time that is a Super Bowl competitive team, or even like a top 3 or 4 team in the AFC. And you can see that with our not having a win in, 17, 18 years since we've last won a playoff game. And so to me, that's what I want. I want a team that actually is, a top 3 or 4 team. I don't want a team that once every 5 years can eke into a wild card spot.
And that's where the discussion comes in, is, do you want to continue to fight and try to patch holes, or do you want to, because this is the sacrifice that you are essentially making if this is what you want to do. You have 2 options. if you're a team that is already not already a perennial Super Bowl contender like New England and the like, then that means you are either A, one of the mediocre teams who is desperately trying to claw their way up to the wild card to prove that they can hang with the best of them, or B, you are one of the bottom feeders in the league and you are constantly getting first round draft picks and such, which means you get the top talent, but that just means that you were really, really, really bad the previous year. So you have a choice. Do you want to continue giving hope and hoping that maybe you can make something out of a little less than some? Because you have to think about this. If you are one of the bad teams, the really bad teams, the ones who are go 1-15, 1 whatever every year, that means that your fan base is going to be very upset because it's like you go into the year knowing you're going to be bad. Is that worse than hoping that maybe this year you'll be good and then getting let down when you realize that you're still not as good as you were hoping? That actually, you know what? You know what? Now that I brought it up, that's a legitimate question. I'll let you answer, Chad. Go ahead. I mean, which is worse for you? Knowing that you're going to suck or thinking that you're going to be good and then finding out you suck?
Oh, I think the latter. I mean that's always a rough feel when you feel like you're I would say Jacksonville would be a very good example for you right now, Lewis, where, coming into this season, obviously Vegas had Miami as one of the worst teams. So being 5-5 from where we started with our team, I don't think that's really that bad for what we had to start with. But for a team like Jacksonville, I mean, this offseason, they're talking about Super Bowl. Jacksonville was going to be one of those top AFC teams now. This was their time. And they're struggling. So I think that's hard because you start to wonder what's our direction now, because if this was supposed to be our year and we're not even competitive, where do we go from here? And so to me, that's the tough part. And unfortunately, Miami's trending that way a little bit because everywhere right now, there's just what does this team have? And the injuries have just been awful because that's where my mindset is right now. Because like I said, I am under no delusion that we're a playoff competitive team. Even if we make the playoffs, I don't think we're just going to get destroyed. I think by the top teams in the AFC. But with that being said, where does that put us in 2019 or 2020? And I think about the players that have been hurt, like Sitton and Kilgore and Albert Wilson. And as these players have been getting hurt, my thought right now is, are they going to be back to full next year? And how much do we have to risk that? So, if we go into next year and Josh Sitton has declined from not hardly playing for a year, or he gets injured right away again, or Albert Wilson just isn't as electrified now after that hip injury, is it going to affect his playability? That carries over into next year where we're not replacing those guys. We're trying to rely on them again. And we can very easily, week 5 or 6 next year be in the same position where we're playing a lot of backup players and we're just not that competitive. So that's my concern and that's always that trade-off that you're talking about. Do you rebuild? Do you do what the Raiders do and you just go out and say, we are not going to be good this year. We're probably not going to be good next year either, but we're going to get a young core of really talented players to build on. So in 2 to 3 years, we could be very good. Sometimes that works. Other times it's like Cleveland. At what point, if you're a Cleveland Browns fan, have you had enough? Like Cleveland is always getting high picks and number 1 picks that are top in the draft, and they just always have been a losing team for decades now. And so that gives you a mindset of maybe it's not so bad being a Dolphins fan. Try being a Browns fan. Where they just haven't never been competitive for a long time. So I guess it just depends on the person, Lewis. I think personally, I like to go into every year and try to win. I don't like to kind of toss the year into the, you don't
want to tank for Tua?
No, I don't think so. I don't think tanking for a player is ever a very good strategy, because I think part of winning is developing a culture of that expectation of winning. And, I don't think the Patriots are good because they tank for players. They they're expected to win, and they get coached very, very well, and that's where we need to trend. And so I think, people that have that comment, is Stephen Ross the problem with this team? Well, he's part of it because he's picking the guys that run this team. And so I don't know, I'm not in the offices to see what Stephen Ross's involvement is, but if I were, I would have some real questions that I needed answered, and very good answers on them with my current people, like with Adam Gase. Here's a good example. This week we signed, was it Bryce Butler, that new receiver we picked up as a free agent? I don't know much about him. I know he's a veteran. I'm sure he's, not a terrible fourth or fifth wide receiver on your team. But if I'm Stephen Ross, I have Adam Gase in my office right now, and I want a very clear explanation on why we've had Isaiah Ford drafted and on this team for 2 years, and he can't play. And why did he even make the practice squad if he can't play? I need to know why, because it can't be an answer that, well, he's just not ready, or he's not putting the time in, or he's been hurt. I want to know why he hasn't been coached enough to be able to be our fourth or fifth wide receiver. That to me is ridiculous, and it's a failure at some point in our coaching or training or whatever that is. There's a failure there, and I want to know why Devontae Parker looks lost at times on the field. Has he not been coached? Is it a player problem? And that's to me where Stephen Ross comes in, and where I think it is a little bit fair to maybe say it starts at the top, and maybe Stephen Ross is not holding his people accountable enough or paying close enough attention. I don't know that, but there are signs that may be the case. And so, if we want to be a Super Bowl caliber team, do we need an owner that makes better choices to start with?
So you're basically saying that Ross is not doing enough, and which also kind of goes against the reports that Ross is already doing too much, meddling where he shouldn't, and reports on those on the likes of those. So
I don't know. That's all I'm asking are questions, Lewis. I don't have answers because I don't know what Stephen Ross does day to day with the Dolphins, whether he shows up to watch the games or whether he's wanting an update on what happens daily in practice or how that works for him. I'm just saying that from a fan standpoint of watching the team, I see many signs. We talked about that in our last show. I went through a lot of them, Lewis. I see a lot of signs that the team has poor coaching right now. And that is, directed at Gase, that I don't see us acquiring players in drafts that we're developing. I see a lot of us grabbing veteran players because Adam Gase's staff, at least, has not been able to develop our players to be very good. And so I think that's been pawned off for a long time, is that we have done a poor job drafting. And I think that gets lost in that, is it always who you pick in the draft, or is it how well you develop that player once you get him in your building? Because it always seems to me like the Patriots never make any real flashy draft picks. You don't see them getting the top guys or moving up to take the top players in the draft. They tend to just bring guys in and coach them up. And they tend to make teams even look ridiculous with guys like Josh Gordon, that the Browns had all kinds of problems with them, but yet the Patriots seem to figure out a way to get productivity out of him. And so that to me is where Stephen Ross comes in, and that has to be fixed before we can move forward. And I guess I don't know that we could ever get that answer, but that would be my question. Is I'm asking those questions. Is Stephen Ross asking those questions on why these draft picks that we have on the practice squad for years aren't, when somebody gets hurt, we have these guys to be developed, and we have to run out and grab a veteran off the street rather than use our own guys. That's been a reoccurring trend with the Adam Gase staff, and I want to know why that is if I'm Stephen Ross, because I'm paying Adam Gase, I'm paying the players that are on the practice squad, and I would want to know what's going on. What are you guys doing, all week long? How are you not ready to play? That would be questions I would ask, I guess, if I were Ross. And maybe he does ask them, or maybe he doesn't. But I think that's probably the very first starting point of getting this team back on the right track. Is I do think Ross has to step in, and I I think he needs to make some bold moves. He's kind of just stayed back because I don't think he's been confident on who are the right football personnel to run his team. And I think he's smart enough to realize he's not that. I don't think he's going to be a Jerry Jones type guy and say, here's who we're drafting. I've read this paper and think it's this guy. I don't think he's going to do that sort of thing. But the good coaches are the ones that seem to win in this league, and that with good quarterbacks. And to me, that's why Patrick Mahomes is doing well, Lewis, is he got paired with Andy Reid. And you can look at Andy Reid's history. He's made the playoffs almost every single year he's coached with whatever team he's been with. He might have not won perennial Super Bowls, but he's always had very competitive football teams. So it's no surprise to me he got a number one quarterback, first-round quarterback, and set him for a year, taught him how to play in his system, and he has him in there, and he's playing very well. And so to me, what Ross needs to do is when he gets a coach that's a very, talented coach, he's got to go after him. And that was something he did do, which I respect, was he went after Jim Harbaugh a few years ago and he didn't get him. And he got scathed in the media because he had Tony Sparano hired, on staff. And at the same time, he tried to hire a different coach. But that's what you got to do. I mean, look at the history of the Dolphins, how we got Don Shula. He was actually the coach. He was with the Colts, and their owner was on vacation, and Shula and the owner had a little bit of a falling out for losing Super Bowl III. And the Dolphins, Joe Robbie just went and got Don Shula. I think we even had to give up a draft pick being fine to get Don Shula. And so I've been vocal. I think John Harbaugh is a pretty good coach. And I look at his overall coaching history, and the Ravens have been a very competitive team for most of the years he's coached them. And if what we want as a team is to get back to just being competitive and being a team that usually make the playoffs, to me, John Harbaugh is somebody I go after immediately if I'm Stephen Ross, to the point where Stephen Ross has donated hundreds of millions of dollars to Michigan. And I feel very confident he was a big part in bringing Jim Harbaugh to Michigan. Obviously, that's John Harbaugh's brother. Obviously, Stephen Ross is well connected in Michigan. Maybe he should be talking to Jim Harbaugh right now and saying, hey, over Thanksgiving, can you tell John Harbaugh that if he gets fired, we are going to take him. We're going to try to hire him right now. And if they get penalized for it, they get penalized for it. But make your moves and get your coach and then get your quarterback. They need to make those moves. And that's something that has to start with Stephen Ross.
I think that oh my God. Chad, I love you, right, brother? I do, right?
Yeah, of course I do.
Okay. So I'm going to say it one more time because I say this, it feels like I say this every show, but I'm just going to, God, do not, under any circumstances, go anywhere near Jim Harbaugh. You want John? Fine, but leave Jim out of it. I'm telling you, he hates Miami, wants nothing to do with Miami. And if we were to ever go to Jim and say, hey, your brother's about to get fired, could you put in a good word for us? Jim will tell him the opposite. He will say, stay far away from Miami. You will never survive your career there. That's
who do you think's a big proponent of Jim Harbaugh's salary right now? Who do you think's making sure he's getting paid a lot of money?
I am positive that Steve Ross is doing that, but only for Michigan's sake, because he's a Michigan alum too. He loves Michigan. He tried Jim Harbaugh 3 times, Chad. It's not like, one and done with Sparano. No, he tried it with Sparano. He tried it before hiring Philbin, and I'm pretty sure he tried it again before hiring Gase too. So it's like, how many times do you have to get snubbed before you realize, you know what, I think this guy just really doesn't want to come to Miami?
Well, no, I'm not fine with that, Lewis. And again, I'm saying I go after John Harbaugh because right now, for me, that's the most likely available coach that could turn the team around. And I don't have a better name. Now, if Bill Belichick was getting fired by the Patriots or leaving the Patriots, or Andy Reid was getting fired or leaving the Chiefs, I would feel the same exact way. You do whatever it takes to go get that guy to be our coach.
I'll jump all over it.
But they're not available.
I know.
And the only reason I'm bringing up Jim, I know it drives you nuts, is because you can't call up John Harbaugh right now if you're Stephen Ross and saying, we want you, because that's tampering. But I don't think you can do much about telling Jim we would love to have John Harbaugh as our coach. And Jim Harbaugh can tell his brother whatever the hell he wants. And at least, I think there's a very good chance John Harbaugh is on his way out from all the signs I'm reading in Baltimore.
Oh, I'm sure he's on his way. I'm sure that I'm almost 90% sure that this is his last year in Baltimore, all because of the Lamar Jackson drama. But that's
I agree. But so my thought is that's what I'm saying. Stephen Ross has to make some hard moves. Now, if you have some other candidates out there that you really feel strongly about, or, maybe people feel like Adam Gase is the right guy and he's going to get it figured out. But we have not seen that yet. And maybe the next 6 games will help maybe feel that way. Maybe Adam Gase can turn this offense around a little bit with Ryan Tannehill. But I know this year's been high on injuries, but every year he's been here, Lewis, our offense has been one of the worst offenses in the league in all the major statistical categories. It's just been terrible. And you just can't win football in the NFL today if you can't score points. The league has changed the rules, and you got to be able to outscore the other team these days. You don't win games 14-10, especially when you don't have a real powerhouse defense. Our defense isn't that good. It's not terrible. I think we have a defense that's probably in the middle of the pack in the league. We've got some talented players on our defense, and I see the upside on our defense. We've got some young linebackers. You got Minka Fitzpatrick in there. Taylor looks like he has a potential when he comes back at D tackle. We've got the infrastructure to build on our defense, and then I turn around and I look at our offense, and I don't see anything. I guess you can say Larmy Tunsil. We have a good young left tackle, but the direction that our team is going right now is just I don't see us being competitive next year on offense unless we get a lot of veteran players that have had season-ending injuries back to full health, and we hit in some draft picks. And so I guess for me, I'm just kind of have moved on from Gase knowing what he's doing, being able to actually develop players, being actually able to implement game plans that can be executed. I think he just is so lost in scheming and trying to out-scheme the other team. He just hasn't been able to put together a football team offensively. And I think he's been aided a lot by special teams. I think Izzo has done a phenomenal job. Look at what he's done with our kicking position, and look at the number of return touchdowns we've had and blocked punts. And so Rizzi, I'm sorry, I said Izzo. Rizzi has done a phenomenal job, I would say, on the special teams to help us be 5-5. And I think Burke, he's had his ups and downs. But I've always pointed this out when people start getting all over Burke. He doesn't ever get to play with a lead. We're never more than 3 to 7 points ahead of somebody. So Matt Burke always has to defend a team's full offense. He doesn't ever get to defend a team one-dimensionally. He doesn't get to be up 21-7 like a Chiefs defensive coordinator or a Patriots defensive coordinator does. It's just a lot easier when your offense is scoring points. And so, Burke is always in that scenario, and he never, or very rarely, I should say, does the offense win games. Like if we have a lead, how often does our offense run the clock out with 3 or 4 minutes left? They just convert a couple first downs and run the clock out. It's almost always 3 and out and punt, and our defense has to prevent the other team from scoring to win. And to me, that all circles back to just an offense that is just really bad. And so until that's fixed, this team's not going to be competitive. And if for 3 years now we've had what's supposed to be an offensive guru and it's not happening, I just feel like it's time for Stephen Ross to be bold and make some moves because, maybe you feel differently, Lewis, but if we're coming back into next year, we're going to roll with Ryan Tannehill and Brock Osweiler as our quarterbacks, maybe Luke Falk in the mix, and we're going to keep Frank Gore and bring back Sitton and our veterans. Do you really feel like Adam Gase and that squad is going to come out and start scoring a lot of points?
Honestly, no. I expect more of the same simply because that would mean that I said this during the last show. I have reached a point where Adam Gase needs to be humbled. He doesn't need to be embarrassed. He's been embarrassed like 15 times now. He gets embarrassed every other week, it seems like. He needs to be humbled. Humbled. I said this on Twitter because somebody said, you don't think Adam Gase is being humbled with all the failures he's getting? No, he's not. If he were being humbled, he would change the way that he's doing things. Because when you are humbled, you come to the realization, this self-awareness kicks in, that what you are doing is not working. And something that you're doing, not the team, not somebody else under you, something you are doing has to change. That's what being humbled does. If you're embarrassed, you just double down on what you did and you try to make it work even harder. But that doesn't fix anything. That was what you had mentioned several games back against the Houston Texans, how they showed the secondary coach talking to the corners and the safeties, and he was yelling at them to play harder and go get it. I'm like, and you were saying like, well, no, duh. You want us to go play harder. That's real help, coach. That's real helpful, coach. Thanks. Yeah, throw strikes. Yeah, that's great advice. That doesn't help anybody. So what are you coaching exactly? And if that's Adam Gase's idea of coaching, which I sincerely hope it's not, because let me put it this way. I have a feeling that the endorsements from the likes of Peyton Manning and John Fox and those guys, all those, I'm not going to say that those recommendations were irrelevant, because they must have meant something to those people. Gase must have meant something to those people. And who's going to sell Peyton Manning that he's wrong about a coach that he really... Maybe Gase really does like to talk football. Maybe Gase really does have a cerebral mind for playmaking and designing and coming up with ways to make things interesting. But that was when he was in a supporting role, not when he was in charge. And he could afford to do stuff like that. That was where his skills... You know, we always talk about how Gase needs to get the players in a position to most succeed. It's possible that coaches need the same type of mentality. Gase needs what's best for him to succeed. Adam Gase needs to be put in a position where he can do the best work that he can. And so far, it doesn't look like that being a head coach is it. Maybe he proves us wrong, because he does have leadership qualities. We talked about this in the last show as well. Because it's kind of funny how no matter what we talk about, it always seems to come back around to the same topics. Because really, it really does boil down to the same things over and over and over and over again. Is Adam Gase good enough? Is Ryan Tannehill good enough? Can the Dolphins overcome the injuries? We repeat ourselves so much because it feels like it's this never-ending loop, this purgatory, and that's why it becomes so frustrating. Because at some point you get tired of explaining why something went wrong, because it always seems like, well, it was the same thing that goes wrong every time. There was a miscommunication. A key player got injured. And that's some of it is coachable. Some of it is just rotten luck, which the Dolphins seem to have a lot of. But the question always remains, and there's never really a definitive answer for it, is what are you going to do about it? And that's the answer we just don't have. You're saying, go get John Harbaugh. Okay, well, that means that... So are you going to bring in John Harbaugh and somehow, so like by some miracle, Jim does not sabotage our chances at getting John right off the bat? Somehow Harbaugh is hired to be the new head coach, and Adam Gase gets fired, gets humbled, and goes to do wherever he lands next, because he will get a job somewhere. So John Harbaugh comes in. Are you giving him power the same way that Adam Gase has power, like over the roster and who he wants to pick and stuff like that? Are you giving him that authority, or are you giving the attention to somebody like Mike Tannenbaum and Chris Greer? Like, let's pretend that it's Vice President X and General Manager Y. Let's pretend that it's not even Greer and Tannenbaum. It's just two people that we don't even know yet. Maybe it's them, maybe it's not. Are you letting them stay in charge, or are you giving John Harbaugh the Bill Belichick seal of approval almost and saying, Mr. Harbaugh, this is your team and we are at your disposal. Go do whatever you want to do. Are you doing that? Because if I recall, one of the bigger reasons that Jim Harbaugh does not want to take jobs in Miami. I'm just now remembering this, and maybe I'm remembering it wrong, but this does feel familiar to me. One of the reasons that Jim Harbaugh said he didn't want certain jobs was because he wasn't being given full control over the team. He was going to have to share power with someone else, and Harbaugh did not want that. He hated the idea of having to share power, and so he said no. And he went to San Francisco, he did things his way, and they were that close to winning a Super Bowl until Ray Lewis and the Baltimore Ravens pulled off some magic and won it from them. After that, the San Francisco 49ers had some infighting. The GM didn't like having to share the credit with Harbaugh. He got jealous, and he wound up kicking Harbaugh to the curb because he didn't want to have to say that it was Harbaugh who brought the 49ers back into relevance and not him. It's a very, very a Jerry Jones-ish situation. Oh, I don't want to share credit with Jimmy Johnson. I wanted to be able to say it was me, Jerry Jones, who brought the Cowboys back to greatness. So egos come into play here. So with that in mind, what are you going to do, Chad? Adam Gase agreed to let Tannenbaum and Greer have some power over what happens. If Harbaugh says that he wants all the power, does the GM and the other stuff even matter? Or are you just going to say, or are you just going to give him a blank check and say, do whatever you want and I will make it happen?
For me, Lewis, I would lean towards giving John Harbaugh more power to get him, but that's hard to say how Ross feels about Tannenbaum and Greer. That's a tough answer because I don't know who does what in their internal structure because that's not very transparent. So
Tannenbaum is the contract negotiator. Tannenbaum is the guy who does the trading ideas. Greer is the main scouting guy. Greer is the one who does the final draft picks and such. And Gase is the guy who gets to decide who stays and who doesn't after all is said and done. That is the very basic structure of the Miami Dolphins front office. And now, if you're saying that that's not a good idea for Harbaugh, then are you saying that Ross, once again, is part of the problem?
Well, what you're describing, I don't know would be that hard for John Harbaugh to work with because I don't think that Tannenbaum, I think you're probably right. I think he's more of a guy that tries to negotiate trades and contracts. I think that's primarily what he does. And I think our drafts for the last 2-3 years have not been that bad with Chris Greer. I think we've been better than we had been in the past anyway. So I guess it depends where John Harbaugh feels with those guys and how Ross feels about their managing, how good a job those guys are doing. I tend to feel right now with not knowing who does what, that the problem is more in our coaching than in our front office because Mike Tannenbaum isn't the guy responsible to get our guys ready to play, and he's not the guy responsible for developing guys. He's trying to get guys here. And so you can criticize him for maybe doing some questionable deals like the Sue deal with how much money he put. But for what's going on with the team, I have a hard time saying it's Mike Tannenbaum's contract negotiating and trades are our problem. And again, I don't feel like Chris Greer has given our coaching staff that bad of players. I feel like he's given them some talent. I mean, Kenyon Drake seems extremely talented to me, but Adam Gase went the route of using Frank Gore, which is fine. Frank Gore is a good back. But here's a valid point. Kenyon Drake has not been developed at all this year, hardly because he's not on the field. Frank Gore is going to be 36 next year. And even though he runs hard and he's a fun guy, teams don't play the run as much with Frank Gore on the field because how scared are you he's going to rip off a 40 or 50-yard touchdown run? I mean, he's had maybe, 2 or 3 long runs this year at most. And how many has Kenyon Drake had with not even near the carries? So I have a hard time pinning that on Chris Greer, for bringing Kenyon Drake in the draft to the team. I feel like the coaches don't understand how to use him right. So they just instead bring in a veteran player that's already been coached. So that's why if John Harbaugh is interested, I just feel like I'm not thinking like John Harbaugh is the best coach to ever live or anything, Louis.
I know you're not. I know what you're saying. I do. I get it. It's Harbaugh is the best available option that you can foresee.
I just pulled him up, and his career winning percentage is almost 60, a little over 65%, 66% of the games he wins, or that's pretty well 2/3. So that means in his career, John Harbaugh has won 2 out of every 3 games he's coached. Adam Gase has won 1 out of every 2 games he's coached so far. That Super Bowl you were referring to, that was John Harbaugh's team that won that Super Bowl. And he's won his division several times. He's made the playoffs several times. And that's in a division with a very good Pittsburgh team. So I just feel like if I'm Stephen Ross and nothing's working, I mean, that's something we both can agree on, Lewis. We've tried about everything we can think of, it feels like, and nothing's working. Maybe this guy's historically looks like he knows how to put together a competitive football team that's year in and year out competitive. So I suppose if you're asking me, I would lean towards giving him more power if that's what it took to get him, without knowing what his demands are or what Stephen Ross's opinion are of Tannenbaum or Greer.
But that's just it. That's the problem. What is Stephen Ross's, the owner, his opinion on Tannenbaum and Greer? If he said if he says I feel like I remember this so carefully, is that basically Ross said to Harbaugh, I want you to come, but you have to keep Ireland. Do you remember anything about that? Because I feel like that's
exactly
what happened.
I do think that's the reason we did not get Jim Harbaugh. It was Jeff Ireland, and whether or not he's good at what he does, he's kind of a jerk. I mean, I think that's been proven several times.
Harbaugh or Ireland?
Ireland. And so, and Jim Harbaugh is obviously a very strong personality as well. And so it doesn't shock me that Jim Harbaugh said, there's no way I'm going to work with a guy like that. And so that, and that's Stephen Ross, you could say that was his fault right there. Where would this team have been if he had just gotten rid of Jeff Ireland and got Jim Harbaugh? But it's all speculation. We're just assuming those things. I don't know how that all played out. We do know he went after Jim Harbaugh and he failed to get him.
Right.
And there, again, if there's a coach or, if Sean Payton became available, I would be highly interested in trying to go get him, just because he's done very well. Now, granted, he's had Drew Brees, but he still has done very well, coaching. But I don't know who's out there right now that you can go get that's going to be a lot better. We've settled a lot. We've already got the Joe Philbins. We went after the assistant that's never shown anything as a head coach. We've went after the hot young guy who's never coached in Adam Gase, and we've done the Tony Sparano, and it just feels like this vicious cycle of we're not really getting the best coaches that are available, and we're taking what we can get per se.
Because generally, if you're good, you don't get fired. The only way that happens if somebody has an ego trip, which seems to be happening in Baltimore.
Yeah, I mean, and it's a different standard right now. I mean, that's the same reason Andy Reid ended up on the Chiefs, was because the Philadelphia, the fans and their management, they just didn't feel not winning Super Bowls was good enough. I mean, he'd made a few Super Bowls, made the playoffs all the time. That wasn't good enough, and so they moved on. And to their credit, they won a Super Bowl. I guess it worked out for them. But I don't think the Chiefs are disappointed that they got Andy Reid. I mean, ever since he's arrived to the Chiefs, they've been a very competitive football team. And so that's, to me, the best you can do in this league. I mean, I know Belichick and Brady have done unbelievably well, and they've won Super Bowls, and they're always good. But nobody else really has been able to replicate what the Patriots do. There's good teams. The Steelers tend to be very good. The Ravens have tended to be very good in the AFC.
Let's not forget the Rams and the Chiefs right now.
Well, yeah, but the Rams, the Rams went all in to be good this year. They're going to be in a lot of difficult spots in 2 or 3 years from now, most likely, with the way they've done their salary cap and the trades they've made. They've kind of done the double thing. They've given up a lot of future salary cap space to get guys there right now, and they've traded off future picks to get guys there. And it's hard to keep your team sustained very long if you don't have cap space or draft picks. And so, they're trying to win the Super Bowl right now, and if it works, great for them. But the Rams have been irrelevant until the last year or two. Nothing like what the Patriots have done, where they've been good for almost 2 decades. We had that during the Shula years, but most teams don't do that. And so that's just something I think as a fan base or as an owner, you got to realize that expecting your coach to win Super Bowls every few years is not realistic in a league that is this balanced. It's this close in talent. It's this competitive. So to me, I want a guy that consistently fields a very competitive football team. And I feel like Harbaugh's done that. You can argue that Gase has done that. I mean, when we talked with Big E the other couple weeks, he has a valid point. The team has had a decent, we made the playoffs in Gase's first year. He loses Tannehill, and this year he really hasn't had much Tannehill, and we're still 5-5. Those are valid points. I just think that's not really Adam Gase because our offense has been horrific. I feel like it's been the rest of what we've had. The Greer's getting decent talent, and the Burke trying to keep us in games at least on defense, and the Rizzo's having special teams excel have been the reason we've been hanging in there, not because our offense is going in and throwing up 35 points on somebody. And so I look at Adam Gase and think, what does he do for the team? Because we've made the argument he doesn't appear to do a lot of head coaching. It appears like he's off scribbling on his pad, focused on trying to be the offensive coordinator and just completely ignoring what goes on the defense. That's more of trying to run the offense and not be a head coach. And our offense is really bad. And so that makes me feel like if I'm Stephen Ross, if I want to get this team back to being very competitive, I need to get a coach in here with a proven track record. And that's why I keep really circling back to let's chase John Harbaugh, because he's a proven winner and he's had, a decade of a competitive team, not he's had a good year. Like I wouldn't feel like chasing the Rams coach would be very wise right now because they stacked his team and he hasn't shown any ability to win over, 6-7 years in a row and be a perennial playoff team. And I don't think the Rams will be. I think they'll be a year or two and then they'll be down struggling again. I don't think it's going to be a coach that's really, really stable. And so I don't know, Lewis, if you have any better idea on how to get a coach that would feel like they can come in and turn it around. I'm all ears for it. I just don't see that guy out there and how to go get him.
I didn't say I had an alternative. I just said the only part I argue with you on, Chad, is just the gym angle. That's it.
Well,
that's
yeah,
the only thing. I'm just like,
true.
If that's what that's the only thing I argue with on. If you're relying on Jim to put in a good word for us, forget it. That's all I'm saying.
Well, I don't know. I would hope that with Ross being involved with Michigan and get him there, I would hope that they actually like each other, but maybe they don't. Maybe Jim Harbaugh has a problem with Ross. I think Jim Harbaugh realized he didn't want any part of the team we had. That was the case, but maybe John Harbaugh will feel the same way. Maybe he'll look at this and think, man, you've got not a ton of salary cap space. You don't have a ton of talent, and you got a quarterback that hasn't played in almost 2 years. He's been hurt a lot. Maybe he won't be that excited to walk into this team because he realizes it's a 2 or 3 year project to get it back. I don't know, but
the 49ers were in worse shape when he took them.
Yeah, but it just depends on, I think the fit. But I'm just saying I chase. And if I'm Stephen Ross, if he really wants to win, you're going to have to make some bold moves, whether that means trading a draft pick for a big-time coach or going after a big-time coach. And it might also mean making a big move to get one of the top quarterbacks in the draft. And to be clear, I'm not anti-Tannehill. I still think he's the best quarterback we've had since Marino, and I still think he's probably in the middle of the league, around 15, best quarterback in the league. I think he's a solid quarterback. With that being said, though, he hasn't quarterbacked the team for about 2 years. And we don't have anybody coming that can replace him. And that, again, I've put that on Gase. I have a lot of problem with last year, Lewis, that Adam Gase is supposed to be renowned at developing quarterbacks and really know that position. And I wonder last year, like, why was Matt Moore our backup last year? Like, why was that? We didn't get a rookie. We went with Matt Moore, and the moment Ryan Tannehill gets hurt, we got to go grab Jay Cutler off the street because Matt Moore is not capable of leading the team. In Adam Gase's mind, at least, I think he probably would have been as good as Cutler in hindsight. But who made that choice? And that to me, if I'm Stephen Ross, I'm asking that question: why do we have to go get Jay Cutler off the street the moment Ryan Tannehill gets hurt? Why do we not have a backup quarterback on this team? And I feel the same way again this year. I mean, that to me was Adam Gase bringing in Brock Osweiler because I think he's like, I know the quarterback position, so I'm going to make the call to bring in Brock Osweiler, and I'm even going to keep David Fales because I'm developing these guys. But their struggle, like Brock Osweiler has not been that good. I mean, he's been maybe average as a backup quarterback standard, but he hasn't come in and started winning games, and he's had his struggles. And so, again, if I'm Ross, why is Brock Osweiler our backup quarterback, Adam Gase? That was your call, right? Why? He clearly isn't getting the job done. What's going on here? Why do we not have a backup quarterback that we're developing? And so that's the kind of stuff I'm looking for right now from Stephen Ross to turn this team around is questions like that. And are we going to make some moves to get that taken care of? Because all I'm seeing, Lewis, is just signs that Adam Gase does not know what he's doing. I see players that aren't getting developed. I see offensive strategies that are not getting executed. And I even see players that are, having trouble with what's going on, like Rashad Jones, whether that has anything to do with Adam Gase or not. Jordan Phillips, Jay Ajayi, I'm seeing a lot of dysfunction from players that are getting jettisoned out. And we saw Adam Gase say, I'm going to bring in the Danny Amendolas, and I'm going to bring in the Frank Gores, and I'm going to bring in my guys that know how to execute my type of system because it's complicated. And, Danny Amendola isn't doing that much. Frank Gore's, he's doing okay, but Frank Gore is not throwing points up on the board. We haven't scored a touchdown in 2 games. And so I'm looking for that right now from Stephen Ross to step in and say, all right, you've made a lot of choices now. This is not working out. Our offense is still struggling. And are we going to keep blaming this that, Tannehill was hurt or we've had injuries? And Ross has kind of come out or was it Adam Gase that referred to Ross saying that he understands that we've had a lot of injuries? We have, but if we hadn't, where would we be right now? And I'm highly questioning whether we'd be maybe 1 win and at best better right now if we didn't have all the injuries. And so,
well, let's be fair though. 1 win better would put us at 6-4, and we would be in a much better position. No,
true, but my question is Adam Gase capable of getting you to 6-4 with adversity or not? Because we've had 2 straight years, it seems like, of adversity, and we're not succeeding at it. And how much of the adversity is the decisions that Adam Gase has made, and how much of the adversity is due to situations that Adam Gase just can't overcome? I don't have an answer to that, but
because you know why, Chad? Because there really is no answer. That's the biggest problem I have with this. That's why it's so frustrating. Why we can't. We're going into what year? We're going to be going into what year 8 of figuring out how much can Ryan Tannehill do, and it's because we just have the worst luck, man. This isn't even analytical. There's nothing scientific about this. There's nothing that we can point at and say, oh, this is an absolutely deductive reason. No, I'm out of deductive reasoning. I have no more explanations, no more reasons, no more anything. I'm just going to go right down the list of players on injured reserve. And I'm going to go in I'm going to name the most important players first. Okay. William Hayes, our top run defender on the edge. Josh Sitton, the best guard in football for a long time now. Vincent Taylor, our best defensive tackle. I don't care what anybody says. Albert Wilson, our most important playmaker on offense all year long. Jakeem Grant is not technically on this list, but considering I saw the report about him having the Achilles tendon in surgery, he's done for the year. So that means there's another playmaker gone every time he gets his hands on the football. So let's cross that off the list. And then, of course, you have Daniel Kilgore, who's supposed to be the starting center. You have let's see, who else? Chase Allen, one of our best backup linebackers. You have Marquise Gray, who was supposed to be our starting tight end. He's gone. Cordray Tankersley, he hasn't done much. And then we have the guys on the practice squad, which right now includes Cameron Malveaux and Jemias Pittman, who have been called up and down as needed. Maurice Smith as well. And when they get to do stuff like that, they kind of do a little bit, but not much, just because it's like everybody's always hurt all the time anyway. I don't have explanations. I don't have reasons. This is when I start getting cynical and I start saying things like, well, it must just be where the stadium is built. They put it on the doggone Indian burial ground, and ever since they got there, they've been rotten, even with Marino around. So at some point, you just reach a level of frustration where it's like, I have no answers. I'm just going to continue to suffer until something changes. And that's why there's like, you don't have an answer. I don't have an answer. No one really has an answer. And the reason is there's no answers. It just is.
Yeah, but yes and no, Lewis. I mean, hindsight's easy. So, I'll say that, with a grain of salt. It's easy for me to sit here and in hindsight say these were bad choices. But Josh Sitton, Pro Bowl guard, yes. He's 30 plus in years, his age, and he's had injury issues in the past. William Hayes, in his 30s, has had injury issues in the past. The team brought those guys in, and to expect players like that to play for a full year, in my mind, it's kind of wishful thinking. I mean, those older players with injury histories tend to get hurt, which is fine. I mean, I'm okay. I'm okay with bringing them in. Don't get me wrong. I like William Hayes and I like Josh Sitton. They're good football players when healthy. But we drafted Asiata, and he just got called up for the first time ever. He has not been prepared to play football, and so we are putting in free agent guards like Ted Larson that are guards that had to play because we have been unable to put a young player that's up and coming behind Josh Sitton. That didn't happen. Albert Wilson got hurt, and I liked that player. He's younger and he's talented, but we can't get Kenyon Drake the ball. He's young, he's fast. We can't get Kenny Stills the ball very much. He's young, he's fast. Devontae Parker, he's transparent half the time. We go games where he'd get one throw to him when he was healthy. Marquise Gray, he's average at best tight end. He wouldn't even make half the teams in the league, to be fair, Lewis. We drafted a guy in the second round in Gilsicki, and he's nowhere ready to play. They cannot get him ready to play. And so I'm questioning, like, are we able to actually coach players? That is the problem. Or is it actually all these injuries? Yeah, your backup linebacker is hurt in Chase Allen, but he's a backup linebacker. That, in the NFL, you're always going to have these sorts of injuries. I don't feel we're that devoid of talent to be struggling this much. I mean, we do have our tackles are still there. I don't think the interior of our line is god awful to not be able to score points anyway.
Well,
and we still got
it was for a while there.
Yeah, but we still can put Kenny Stills, Danny Amendola, Devontae Parker, and Kenyon Drake on the field. That's a very fast, capable set of skill players. But we don't have a quarterback maybe that can get it done in Osweiler, and we went with Tannehill, which I'm fine with. And next year, this isn't a popular opinion. I think you stick with Tannehill. But you've got to have the next guy up right now, and they've got to be developing those guys. And, we went through those Marino years, but, Miami, they were very competitive with Scott Mitchell at quarterback because when Shula was there, they spent time developing him to be a capable backup. They drafted him and developed him. And I don't see right now our team drafting and developing players. And so I think that's, in my opinion, the best way to get successful. You do get guys like Josh Sitton and William Hayes, but you can't then say if those 30 plus players that are injury prone or have a history of injury anyway get hurt, well, our season shot, if that's your game plan to start the year and need your 30-year-old guard and 30-year-old DN to hold up to make the playoffs, then that's not a very good strategy to make that happen. And we made moves, we made the decision to get rid of Ndamukong Suh. Whether you're a fan of him or not, we have struggled at the defensive tackle position. We've had injuries there. We cut Jordan Phillips outright, and we've struggled on the interior of our line. And that was the reason we cut Ndamukong Suh to add Danny Amendola, to add Frank Gore, to add Josh Sitton. And you have to wonder if we had not done that and we had kept Ndamukong Suh, well, then suddenly that Williams Hayes injury maybe isn't as devastating to our defensive line.
I'm not convinced about that just because we saw the lines with Suh on it for like what was it 3-4 years, and they weren't spectacular either. Suh made plays, but everybody else flopped as a result.
True, but I think we don't have anybody even close right now. Taylor is the only promising player at all we've really seen at our D tackles.
Godshaw.
Has he ever been dominant? I mean, he's had he's had some okay games. Most of his better games were alongside Sue. I'm not saying Godshot is a terrible player, Lewis. I'm just saying he doesn't look anything to me like a dominant Pro Bowl defensive tackle. That's what Ndamukong Suh has been at times, and so we got rid of him to bring in what? That's the question I'm making when I'm circling back and saying, yes, we've had injuries, but what was that our plan? Was our plan to get rid of a perennial Pro Bowl defensive tackle and expect Frank Gore, Danny Amendola, and Josh Sitton to lead this team to the playoffs? It clearly hasn't happened, and I don't know that it was a great move to begin with, but the idea behind that move was those players would know how to execute Adam Gase's offense. That the reason this team has struggled is because Adam Gase needed his guys. He needed to change the culture. And we kind of sacrificed talent a little bit for culture. And we're still doing that. And that I'm making that point that, okay, we've got Kenyon Drake, but we're focused on using Frank Gore because he's supposed to be better in Adam Gase's system. Is that the reasoning? Or
because he's more consistent than Kenyon Drake. Frank Gore goes forward. Kenyon Drake tries to go sideways so he can go more forward.
Okay, so if that's true, why is our offense always the highest in the league, or the top 5 in the league in penalties? Why do we struggle so much at converting third downs and first downs if we have got consistent players on the field? That there's a problem there. There's a disconnect there of it didn't change anything for me right now. There wasn't a culture change, or at least there wasn't a change on our offense. It's still suffering all the same problems. And so to me, that is somewhat Adam Gase, because I think he's the one who's making some of those choices on who he wants to play and on who they want to bring in. But this week, again, for me, Lewis, it was just a cycle of the same exact thing. So we've lost Jakeem Grant now. And so the team's response to that was not to bring up Isaiah Ford, a guy that we've drafted, have had on our team for a couple years. In the preseason, appears to me to be pretty talented. He looks big, tall, and fast to me. Yet we're bringing in like a 7-year veteran that's been a perennial like number 4 wide receiver on a team with no upside. Bryce Butler is not going to be on this team next year even. He offers us no ability to get better in the future.
Well, I don't know how. Again, somebody, I had made the comment on Twitter about Bryce Butler. I'm like, I had just the same amount of frustration as you did. Just like, who the heck is Bryce Butler, and why are we bringing him up instead of Isaiah Ford or even Malcolm Lewis? And I even questioned where the heck is Francis Owusu, and then I realized that he got signed by like some other league somewhere. So he's probably spending that time trying to get better there. And maybe, who knows, maybe he gets brought back later, because I really like Owusu, but that's besides the point. So Bryce Butler stands in. He's 6'3". He's 28 years old. Again, it's the same thing you said. It's somebody else. It's a team. It's a player that somebody else coached, and not the Dolphins. But yes, I wouldn't say he brings nothing. He does have size similar to Parker, so I will say that.
What do you think the chances he makes the starting 53 next year?
0. I'm sure he won't be here. I get your point. I do understand your point. Understand your point.
So my point is how did Isaiah Ford make the team this year? And if Isaiah Ford made this team, which he did, and he was drafted, and what is he, the 5th or 6th wide receiver on our team in depth? He made the team as. That's my question: is how is he not ready to step in and play right now? He's got to know the offense. They've got to understand what they have in him when they kept him. Why do we need to run out and grab? I mean, this is no disrespect to signing these guys. And I agree, he's 6'3", he's big. He'll probably be able to be our number 4 receiver. He's Devontae Parker-like in size. But if he were that special, he wouldn't have been on 4 or 5 teams.
Yes, he wouldn't be on the open, and he wouldn't have been on the open market all this time. Yes.
How is a guy on the open market better than the guy that made our team and on our practice squad? And why is that? Those are the questions I need to have answered if I'm Stephen Ross. And why is it that if Josh Sitton gets hurt, we're done for the year? Why is Asiata not ready to back him up right now? That's a question I would have. If William Hayes gets hurt, we're done. Like, why was our defensive line not okay when we have Quinn and Branch and Wake and Harris and all these guys? Where's the coaching responsibility in there? Because there's something wrong, Liz. I'm with you. I can't say here's the problem. It's obviously this, but there's something wrong with the way we're having to grab players when somebody gets hurt, that our own guys aren't ready to play. And I need to understand where that's coming from. Is why are players struggling to develop? And I don't know. I don't have the answer to that, other than that, to me, that has to be coaching.
And you're probably right, Chad. Again, this is where I once again say, it's like, since I don't have a definitive answer, it becomes frustrating, because when you don't have a definitive answer, the only answer that you can say is, well, if you can't find the one thing that's wrong, get rid of everything, because even if you get rid of some stuff that's right, you also got rid of the stuff that's also wrong. You cut out the cancer by like amputating the leg. Oh, good. It gets rid of the problem, but it also gets rid of a lot more.
Or it creates a worse one. I mean, I understand that too. Like I was pointing out, the Cleveland Browns, we've had a lot better last 5 years than the Browns have. And look at them; they've already lost their head coach and offensive coordinator this year, and so they're just a mess again. But with that being said, if you want the positive side of it, is our left tackles are healthy. For Adam Gase, his system to be successful, you've got to have good left tackles, or good right end left tackles, because Adam Gase likes to run a lot of shotgun. He likes to have 3 wide receivers on the field, and he likes to throw a lot of short passes and get the ball out. And to be able to do that, you've got to have tackles that are able to hold off defensive ends that ignore that you're going to be a problem running the football. So they tend to crash the quarterback a lot. So you need to have offensive tackles that can handle defensive ends that focus more on pass rushing. Would that be fair to say, do you think, with what Adam Gase does? Why I have been frustrated in recent weeks is because when our people have gotten hurt, when we have an offensive tackle get hurt and we've got Stirrup or Sam Young in there, Adam Gase has been too stubborn to realize that you can't run that same offensive scheme with that personnel. And that's what happens, is those tackles get beat and your quarterback gets sacked, and Brock Osweiler throws an interception or he fumbles because he's under a lot of pressure or he's getting hit. Versus what I was saying was, you've got to go into kind of under center and double tight and be more conservative. And it's not pretty, but pound Frank Gore, and don't let your quarterback have to deal with constant pressure from backup tackles, because a lot of mistakes tend to happen and turnovers tend to happen and penalties tend to happen. And that's what's unfolded. Now, as we come into the last 6 games, our tackles are healthy. Ryan Tannehill's coming back, and as ridiculous as people have been on Twitter, that it is ridiculous, Brock Osweiler is nowhere near as good a quarterback as Ryan Tannehill. I can say that confidently, assuming Ryan Tannehill's healthy, which is another topic. But our quarterback position is going to be better. Our tackles are going to be healthy again. And we do have Kenny Stills. I think Devontae Parker's practicing, isn't he? Last I heard.
Yes, he's probably going to play. Which I don't know if I should be relieved or not, but whatever.
Well, I'm just saying we're going to have Danny Amendola, Kenny Stills, and Devontae Parker. And God help me if those guys don't know this offense right now and can't execute it. I don't know what's been going on in practice for the last year. But I'm
2
going
years.
Yeah, well, Amendola's new, but he's been in the league for a long time. But
no, Amendola knows what he's doing. That I can tell you for sure.
Well,
that boy is cerebral.
So coming into this Colts game, we're going to have our tackles healthy. We're going to have our starting quarterback back, and we're going to have 3 talented wide receivers that know the offense. We should be able to move the football, and we'll have Drake and Gore at running back, and hopefully our interior will have settled in a little bit better. We still have Jesse Davis.
Jake Brendel is a major upgrade over Ted Larson. I don't care what anybody says.
Well, yeah, and Swanson, I don't know if there's a huge difference between him and Kilgore, to be honest. Once Swanson settled in, I don't know. I could be wrong on that, but I'm just saying our line's probably back to at least average. Our quarterback's back, and we still have 3 capable wide receivers. I'm hopeful that's enough that those guys can execute Adam Gase's offense to score some points, against a Colts team that isn't that good. The Colts have been playing better lately, but we're not coming in against a powerhouse defense right now. We should be able to score points. And if we score points, we still have Cameron Wake and Robert Quinn that can rush off the edge. If we can get some points on the board, maybe get a lead. We still have Minkah Fitzpatrick, Rashad Jones, and Xavier Howard in the defensive backfield roaming around. I think McCain is back, Bobby McCain. And so we actually have a fairly competitive team coming back into this game, Lois. So I don't want to be negative. I think we absolutely can still make the playoffs with the team we have. I don't think we're anywhere near, again, the top teams, but it isn't all like terrible. But, to me right now, if I'm Stephen Ross, I don't give Adam Gase much of a pass due to injuries. I think he has enough on this team right now to be able to win these games. And if Adam Gase doesn't have this team at 9-7, I question whether or not he can really get it done. And that to me is the last 6 games. That's what I expect out of Stephen Ross. Is it seems like there's been a lot of mismanagement, and we're down to these last 6 games. Here you go. Adam Gase has a lot of his guys still. He's got Damian Amendola. He's got Frank Gore. He's got his tackles healthy. He's got his quarterback right now. Don't you think they should be able to start scoring some points? If Adam Gase knows what he's doing, or if he is going to be your coach next year, I think that's what you need to see out of these last 6 games.
Oh, I'm not debating that for even a second, but this is what I'm really concerned about, Chad, and I'm starting to think that even if the ball does start to get moving a little bit, I feel like that even then the league has passed Gase and us as a whole. It's just passed us by. I'm looking at the final scores for a lot of these games recently. Chad, it feels like every other game there's this just monstrous explosion of scoring. The Colts put up 38 on the Titans just this past week when we were doing our bye week. The Buccaneers and the Giants had a 35-38 shootout. The Saints put up 48 on the Eagles, and the Chiefs and the Rams. Oh my God, that Monday Night Football game, 51-54. The Dolphins don't put up 50 on anybody. And even the week before that, the Steelers put up 52 on the Panthers, and then you have the Saints putting up 51 on the Bengals, the 31-36 Seahawks Rams, and you have 41-10 with the Bills and the Jets, 34-22 with the Bears, 34-10 with the Titans and the Patriots. We don't score that many points, and up until this year, you would think that it was unheard of that teams could score that much so often. Another week 9 of the league, 41-9, the Bears on the Bills, 41 points. The Panthers put 42 against the Buccaneers, who scored 28. It's like we can't score that much. We couldn't score that much even in our best day. So it feels like that we're going to constantly be trying to keep up with a league that is becoming more and more offense based. I've reached the point where it's like, how do you even keep up with this? What are these teams doing? What are they doing that's so special that they can put up that many points at the same time? It seems like every other week. That's not normal. And that's part of the reason why it feels like maybe that's why they want new coaches. This is just a theory I'm having that literally just popped into my head. Maybe this is why they keep wanting the new coaches to come in here, because the new coaches can adapt to the new rules easier, because they keep changing the rules to make it so that then more offense scores, more points, because more points means more money, because more people like touchdown dances than they do seeing like fumbles and pick sixes and running the ball to stop the clock. They don't like that stuff. It's boring. They don't want to see that. So the business model screams offense, and this year has been the most offense-oriented league that I have ever watched in my entire life. It's baffling how many points teams score on a weekly basis now. And it's not just, one team put on a clinic and the rest was just more normal. No, it feels like at least 2 or 3 teams are putting up 50 every single game. And that's unbelievable. Like,
Well,
how do you compete with that? You can't.
Is it unbelievable, Lewis? I mean, the NFL has
It
been
is,
changing.
this is the first time it's ever happened this way, ever.
Yeah, but that's what the NFL has been trying to do. I mean, that's the way they're making their rules. The NFL wants teams scoring points because people like to watch games where teams go back. People love the Rams Chiefs game. They love watching these teams go back and forth and score points. And the NFL realizes that, and so they have adjusted the rules to try to make it more conducive to score. That's just the case, and I feel like the Dolphins have tried to address that. They went and they got an offensive coach. Adam Gase brought in a bunch of offensive playmakers, but it doesn't matter right now. I mean, to me, that's the reason the Dolphins are not one of those teams right now is its execution. It's not our personnel, and I don't even think it's necessarily Adam Gase's scheme. The players, you can't be a top 5 team in the league in penalties, and you can't have wrong routes and drop passes and miss blocks. It's the guys not able to do their jobs and execute it. And I think we've been through that cycle for years now, Lewis. It's like, we need to get better players. We need to get better players. And I've kind of just let go of that and just said, we need to develop what we're getting. And, as I look into next year, we need Kenyon Drake and Kalen Ballage to be our running backs next year, because we can't afford to have to use draft picks on running backs with all the holes we have. We need Devontae Parker to be a receiver next year and a stud, or we got to let him go because he's $9 million. We need Kenny Stills and these guys to be our guys next year. And you can't expect like Frank Gore to be your man next year, and you can't expect Danny Amendola to be your guy next year. These guys are into their 30s. They're just not the players you're building on. And I just don't see our young players being developed right now. We absolutely have got to be doing that if we're ever going to catch up to these teams and be competitive. Because right now, this offseason is going to be brutal hard, Lewis, because we've got, is Josh Sitton going to be back to what he was? That's a real fair question. Is Kilgore going to be back to what he was? Is Albert Wilson going to be back to what he was? And, if they're not, or if you're not sure about that, you've got millions of dollars tied up into them. And do you then use your draft picks to replace them, or do you roll the dice with them? And, what we have to have is the young players on this team that we can bring back that are affordable next year. They have got to be ready to help this team and be scoring points and on the field. And that's my biggest worry right now is Adam Gase is so focused on, which I think he is still trying to make sure he has a job next year. I think Adam Gase knows he's got to be 8-8 or 9-7, or he may be fired. And that means he's making decisions just to try to get that this year. And it's costing us potentially next year, because at what point does that reality set in that this is not a Super Bowl competitive team? That is not really even a playoff competitive team. Even if we did somehow sneak in, I feel like we're just, can you imagine if we've got to start against the Chiefs in the playoffs, like what they would do to our team? I mean, we might lose that game 75 to 10 or something, because our offense does that 3 and out, and you keep putting Mahomes and crew back on the field right away. My God. And so, at some point that reality has to set in that this team is not realistically competitive to go anywhere in the playoffs this year. And knowing that, you need to be playing the players that are going to be contributing to your 2019 team. And I'm not saying you sit guys like Cam Wake and just play Charles Harris just because. Cam Wake probably will be on our team next year. He seems to be, the ageless wonder. But I do think, Kenyon Drake has got to be featured in this offense, because I just don't see Frank Gore being our main back next year. He's going to be 36. Kalen Ballage needs to be getting more reps on the field. I know they're starting to work him in, but Mike Gesicki, if he's failing or not, he's got to be on the field, and he's got to be a same threat tight end for next year or not. And so, putting all these veterans on the field, signing veterans that are off the street right now and starting them in place of younger players to me is really putting us in a position for failure next year. And that's a huge concern for me, is the direction we're going for next year. And I just, I'm just really feeling right now, I hate to be negativist, I just feel like we're going to come into next year and we're going to be relying on all these guys coming back from severe injuries and hoping that they come back to form. And I think we're going to see guys like Josh Sitton that maybe he'll be back next year, but he'll probably have declined a little bit. He won't have played football for a year. He's coming back from a severe injury. Is he going to be physically as quick? Is he going to be physically as strong? Is he going to be able to hold up for a whole year? And because we've already tied the money into those guys and they're returning back, and because right now we're not developing younger players to step up and be the guy scoring points, we're headed into another really rough season with probably, I think where Stephen Ross is at, probably going to keep Adam Gase, who's going to kind of be a lame duck of sorts for a coach. And if Gase is coming back next year in that scenario, I just don't feel like, is this team really going to want to make the move to grab a young quarterback? Because I think you keep Ryan Tannehill next year, and I think you move up in the draft and you get the best possible quarterback you can, whether that means giving up a number one pick or two in the first round. That's a strategy that's built for continuously improving over the next couple years. But Adam Gase may not be willing to do that because he's not going to have a couple more years to have a quarterback on the bench behind Ryan Tannehill to develop. By that time, he'll be somebody else's quarterback. And so that's right now my biggest concern is when you get into these year threes and year fours with coaches that are failing, the personnel starts to become jumbled. It starts to become conflict of interest on, do you win now, or are you trying to be Super Bowl competitors? And Miami's in that gray area big time right now because they've made choices this year clearly that were to try to win right now. They're making choices to win right now, and they're playing the players to try to win right now. And I just don't see it. I don't see the execution going on, and there's going to need to be a major turnaround over the next 6 games with Gase being right that these were his guys, and it was just Tannehill being hurt, and that was it, and it's going to turn around now, and that's what it's going to be about, Lewis. If that happens and this team starts winning, and I hope I'm proved wrong. I hope that Adam Gase knows exactly what he's doing, and it was just some bad luck, and it's getting ready to come together. Because if it doesn't come together, and we go into next year with, we finish 7-9 or something like that, and we just draft, a linebacker, an offensive lineman or something, and we roll the dice with Tannehill being healthy again all next year, and Josh Sitton being healthy, and all the same team for the most part returning, we're just in for another really long year.
And that's what I'm. You know what, man? Somebody had tweeted me this just during the show. Is that, do you think the Dolphins are the only team that's rooting for the implementation of the double bye weeks? I'm sure that's not the case, but I'm just thinking to myself, maybe if we had 2 bye weeks, we would not be limping quite as much.
Yeah, I think it's, I don't know. You're extending the season or how they do add another bye week, but I think right now the NFL does things I don't agree with, but I'm not in charge of the NFL. But I already said I think the season to me should be maybe a little shorter, and we should have more teams getting into the playoffs. And so you're playing playoff games more than regular season games, and I think that the traveling the NFL does isn't that great, where you have teams going to London, and that makes it harder on the players to get rested properly and prepared properly. And I think even though it's, good for money and ratings, I think the Thursday night game is really hard on teams and players when you've got to play, a Thursday night game off of a Sunday and have players healthy or players playing injured and stuff like that. So there's a lot to that, I guess, if you want buys or how to keep teams more healthy. But that every given year, that's part of the luck of the game is teams that get hurt and don't get hurt. But, again, the Patriots have had lots of bad injuries in the years, and the Steelers have had lots of bad injuries in the years. The Steelers had their star player not even show up this year, but they seem to still be winning. And so there's just something there that we don't have, and I feel like it's at the coaching level, but that's all you can do is just keep hoping that your guys stay healthy in the meantime.
I suppose so. Uh, well, man, I think we've covered just about everything there is to talk about. Well, I'm sure we've covered it like ad nauseum at this point, because again, like we keep saying, it seems like we just keep repeating ourselves over and over again, because there's really not much else to go on except this happening and this happening and this happening. The Dolphins have 6 games to prove that all of our griping is not true. We'll see. I don't expect to be proven wrong, but I won't be upset if I am. I have said in the past that that it's not just the end result that matters; it's also how it happens. When people got mad at me because the Dolphins lost, or rather they won against the Jets with a very bad mistake from the Jets quarterback, I think it was actually Ryan Fitzpatrick at the time, and the Dolphins won that game, I was very upset because the Dolphins had played like garbage all game long, and the Jets just played like more garbage. And I didn't want to just take the win. I was like, no, that wasn't a win. That was the Jets losing, and we just got lucky. And it's going to come back to bite us because we're going to give ourselves a false sense of security. This kind of feels like it's the same situation again. Right now, the end results are we are 5-5. We are mathematically still in the playoffs, but the team is not performing even close to on par with the rest of the league. In fact, there would even be times where you could argue that even though the Browns have a worse record, and they do, the Dolphins are not as good as the Browns. Just by looking at them play, watching them play, it doesn't look like the Dolphins are on par with most of the teams in the league. They have a better record than a lot of other teams, but they don't play as well. And that's where it becomes that, again, more frustration. Why are they winning, and why do they look like crap while they win? And that's the thing. If you're a winning team, you should be able to execute and make those plays that you're talking about. They should be able to do the things that all these other teams are doing, all these exciting, amazing, incredible plays. We were talking about, I was playing basketball a couple days ago with some friends, and they were talking about Patrick Mahomes and how he throws the football like it's a baseball because he used to be a baseball star. And so it's carried over into the league. And so maybe we need to rewrite the book on what it means to be a quarterback, make all of our future NFL prospects go play baseball for a couple of years and learn how to throw the ball that way. And maybe that'll make things better for when they have to run around like a chicken with their head cut off and make an amazing play, because that's what Mahomes does on a regular basis. I just don't know, man. It's all these weird ways of trying to explain it, or it's the same way it's the same approach that you've had for the past few shows that we've done, and it's just basically saying the same thing over and over again. And you are technically right. But it's the same thing over and over again. There's really not much else to say. Gase is not doing things properly. He's not developing players. He's not doing so and so. All of these things you're saying. And it feels like you say it 10 times per show, but it's true. And that's the problem. There's really not much else to say. And that's what is so frustrating. So hopefully they'll give us something better to talk about come Sunday. And we can say, okay, now we can talk about something a little bit different. But before we go, since tomorrow is Thanksgiving, and I want to, Chad, this is going to be this isn't football related, but I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here, but I want to very quickly just say that I am thankful for everybody who comes and listens to the show and supports us here at PhinManiacs. I'm very thankful for my family and for everybody who supports us as we go through everything that we're doing here in our lives, and as we go on trying to complete our daily goals. It does mean a lot, and I like to thank God just because it's incredible how far we've managed to come just by doing this, and just having. I'm not used to talking like Frank on live air, but it really is a matter of just thank you, everybody, and thank you to everybody who listens and supports, just so that we can have that we can keep doing this for you guys. As much as we gripe and as much as we complain, we do enjoy it, and we do appreciate everything that goes on. And we would like to also thank the Dolphins for giving us the opportunity to do this. Just another thing to add to be thankful for. Before we go, Chad, do you have anything that you'd like to say as far as like what are you thankful for as we approach Thanksgiving?
Well, I think, when you get into the football stuff, one thing I'm always big on is I get very critical on the field stuff, but I always just leave that. There's nobody on the Dolphins that I get frustrated with off the field. And, as much as you complain, I think you were even around that. They were handing out meals. The team was doing that in the rain. And so, despite the team maybe not ever doing what you want on the field and you gripe and critique, I do think it's a good organization. And I think they do a lot of good things for Miami and for a lot of unfortunate people. And I think when you get into Thanksgiving, it's at least thankful for if you're rooting for a team that does good things for good causes. There's a lot of good people with the Dolphins that are generally good people that has nothing to do with winning or losing on the field.
And I'm sure that we kind of just skipped over like the blanket statements. Oh, I'm thankful for my family. I'm thankful for this and that. It's like, yeah, that goes without saying. I know.
Yeah, that I don't. Everybody knows that stuff already.
yeah, I gotcha. But anyway, but it is true though. We're thankful for our families and for everybody who supports us. And again, thank you for listening with us and thank you for supporting us all this time. We're going to go ahead and call this a show. Hopefully we are talking about the 6-5 Dolphins beating. I think this would be wouldn't this be like the first time that the Dolphins beat the Colts? Like Tannehill would actually end up beating Andrew Luck, or did he actually beat him?
No, I want to say the last time we played the Colts, we beat them. Like, I'm not sure on that, but I want to say we did. It was in Miami, I want to say, but I know we lost to. I actually saw it in live. I saw Luck and Tannehill play when they were both rookies in Indianapolis, and Luck won that game. But I want to say they've met again, and Tannehill won the next meeting. But I'd have to research that one, Lois. I will say for the game, I do think Miami is going to be competitive in this game. I don't think the Colts are just going to come in and roll over Miami, and so Miami's had 2 weeks. That makes an enormous difference in this league when you get to play off of a bye week. And so if you're a fan of the team, I think this would be a fun game to watch because you're going to have Tannehill back. He's going to be going up against Andrew Luck. And these teams are much more competitive. It's a pretty evenly matched game, in my opinion. And so it should be a fun game to watch. So I would encourage everybody to maybe not skip this one. That this will be an entertaining game.
Here's hoping. All right. So once again, thank you all so much for joining us. We will try to get another show up fairly soon. I don't know, but I can't promise that we're going to do this weekly. And this whole being it on a Wednesday thing was definitely an aberration, at least until the summer rolls around again, just for me. So we'll see what we can do. We'll hopefully be able to get more stuff done. And until then, ladies and gentlemen, have yourselves a happy Thanksgiving and, of course, a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year and all that stuff. I'm sure we'll do another show before then, and I'll say it again, but just in case, once again, another blanket statement. But for sure, Happy Thanksgiving. Don't make your stomachs explode with too much stuff, but by all means, indulge. I'm looking forward to some good old-fashioned apple pie. So, once again, thank you all so much for joining us. For myself and Chad Ronnebaum, we will see you guys next time.